The cold winter air stung Kevin Darby's skin as he stood in the doorway, shirtless, barefoot, and soaked in blood that was quickly turning dark against the pale skin of his arms. He didn't flinch, didn't move, just stood there, frozen in time as snow began to fall behind him. The wind howled like a grieving widow. The porch light flickered overhead, casting eerie shadows across the front lawn. One bulb sputtered and died. Inside, the cries of children echoed from the second floor. 5 voices, shrill and frantic, overlapping, some calling for mommy, others just screaming. But Kevin didn't move toward them. He didn't move at all. His knees finally gave out as he stepped back into the house, collapsing onto the blood-soaked rug by the fireplace. The Christmas stocking still hung untouched from the mantel, even though it was mid-January. Tessa had left them up just a little longer for the kids. Her soft handwriting. Mom, Dad, Jasper, Layla, the twins, Drew, stared back at him like an accusation. On the floor, before him, lay her body, Tessa Moore Darby, her head tilted awkwardly to one side, eyes glassy, her floral nightgown clinging to her like silk dipped in red paint. There were 3 stab wounds, 2 in the chest, 1 just beneath the collarbone. It had sliced through the chain of the necklace she always wore. The pendant, an angel holding a baby, had snapped off and skidded under the couch, where it now lay buried in shadow. Kevin didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just stared at his wife, at the blood on his hands, at the life that had unraveled in a single violent second. 10 years of marriage, 5 children, a home built from the ashes of war and trauma, church Sundays, soccer practices, family picnics, movie nights, a woman he'd believed in, a love he'd sworn was unshakable. And now, who the hell did I marry? That question echoed louder in his skull than the sirens outside. The paramedics arrived too late. 2 of them stood frozen in the doorway, assessing the scene with the stoicism of people trained to walk through hell. One of them whispered something to the other. Kevin couldn't hear it, didn't care. He was too busy staring at the blood still dripping from the tips of his fingers, forming tiny red galaxies on the oak floor. A police officer stepped in behind them. Officer Brennan, local, knew Kevin from church. Their kids were on the same little league team. Kevin, the officer said gently, almost like he was trying to wake someone from a bad dream. Kevin, can you tell me what happened? Kevin looked up slowly. His eyes were distant, not blank, haunted, alive but barely. She lied to me, he said. What do you mean? Kevin swallowed, the motion slow and mechanical. Everything was a lie. He didn't resist when they cuffed him, didn't argue when they read him his rights, didn't flinch when they let him pass the open-mouthed neighbors gathered on the sidewalk in their pajamas and robes. One woman clutched her chest. Another cried silently. Mr. Franklin from next door held a baseball that he didn't even realize he grabbed on the way out. They all said the same thing later. He was so normal. He was a perfect dad. They were a beautiful family. Until tonight, in the holding cell, under the dim yellow light and the stink of old piss, Kevin sat on the metal bench, hunched forward, hands dangling between his knees. The blood had dried now, flaky and black beneath his fingernails. Detective Arlene Ross entered the room. Mid-40s, sharp jawline, dark circles under her eyes from years of unraveling human cruelty. She looked at Kevin for a long time before speaking. You're not a dumb man, Mr. Darby. You know what you did. What I need to know is why. Kevin didn't look up. She lied to me. What kind of lie makes a man kill the mother of his children? Kevin closed his eyes. Images flickered behind him like a projector on loop. Tessa's face. Their wedding day. Layla's first steps. The kids in Halloween costumes. Her laughter in the kitchen. And then the clinic. The truth. The file folder. The voice that said, I was born Thomas. He opened his eyes and stared at the detective. She wasn't the mother. What? She wasn't the mother of my children, he said, his voice a monotone blade. She was never even a woman. Word spread quickly. Ex-Marine kills wife after discovering she was biologically male. 5 children left orphaned after domestic tragedy. Church family torn apart by gender identity secret. Everyone had a theory, a take, an opinion. The headlines didn't capture it. The blogs and talk shows didn't understand it. What made this man, this quiet, decorated veteran, this father of five, snap? They called it rage. Some said it was transphobia. Others said it was PTSD. But it wasn't that simple. Kevin Darby hadn't killed because of what Tessa was. He killed because of what she'd hidden. For how long? For what she built with him, on top of a lie. 5 children. And now, not one of them bore his blood. 10 years of love. And none of it had been rooted in truth. Or had it? That's the question that haunted Kevin more than any headline ever could. Because buried beneath the betrayal was love. Real. Consuming. Fierce. And maybe that's what truly broke him. Kevin Darby had come home with shrapnel in his leg and silence in his soul. Afghanistan had taken parts of him no surgeon could stitch back. He was 29, battle-worn, proud, and adrift, until he stepped into that chipped-up roadside diner just off Highway 23 in Macon County. She was behind the counter, sliding a slice of lemon pie onto a plate like it was holy. Her name tag read Tessa, but that wasn't what caught him. It was the way she moved, soft, deliberate, as if every step was meant to keep her from being seen too closely. Long sleeves in the middle of June, eyes that scanned the room like she owed someone a debt. Kevin ordered coffee. She poured it silently. Their conversation started with 2 words. Cream? Yes. 3 weeks later, he was coming in every night, even when he wasn't hungry. Tessa wasn't like the women back home in Birmingham. She didn't flirt. She didn't pry. And when he asked her out, she said yes like she didn't know how to say no. They went slow until they didn't. Kevin was the one who fell first. Tessa never spoke about her childhood, never showed family photos, never explained the faint scar that ran across the base of her throat. She said she had no siblings, that her parents were gone. She never spoke of high school, never had friends visit, and flinched every time a camera came out. When he asked about it once, she gave him a look so panicked it silenced him for good. He told himself, it's trauma. Everyone's carrying something. He was, and maybe silence was a kind of trust. They married in the fall. Just the 2 of them, and a justice of the peace in a courthouse that smelled like pine cleaner. Tessa wore cream lace and kept glancing at the window like she expected someone to burst in and drag her away. But they weren't caught. They were husband and wife. Kevin carried her across the threshold of their rented duplex with hero's pride. Jasper was born the next summer. Scheduled C-section. Kevin was told it was a precaution. Tessa had some complication in her uterus that made natural birth dangerous. He didn't question it. He held Jasper in his arms and wept like a man being reborn. 2 years later came the twins, Avery and Eli. Then Layla. Then baby Drew. 5 kids in under 10 years, each born under the glow of a hospital's artificial light. Each birth scheduled. Each time, Kevin was ushered out of the room for safety. Each time, the same obstetrician, the same excuse. We just want to make sure everything goes smoothly. Tessa never breastfed, said it was too painful. Kevin didn't argue. She cried easily, slept with the door locked, kept a safe under the bed with documents she refused to explain. She changed with the bathroom door shut tight. Every time. And yet, she loved those kids with a fire that never flickered. She cooked dinner every night, sang lullabies with trembling hands, clutched Layla during storms like she might disappear with the lightning. Kevin watched her rock baby Drew on the porch swing one humid night and told himself this was happiness, even if it had cracks, even if it came with questions. There were little things, too, oddities that scraped the back of Kevin's mind but never made it to his lips. Tessa didn't have a period. Or at least, he never saw signs of one. She kept her toiletries locked in a drawer. When they were intimate, she always turned off the lights and insisted on missionary, never letting him touch her below the waist. Kevin chalked it up to trauma. Again, maybe abuse, maybe shame. He was taught not to push. But denial can become religion when you repeat it enough. One night, about 3 years after baby Layla, Kevin woke to find Tessa sitting on the edge of their bed, trembling. Her nightgown was soaked in sweat. Her face was pale as porcelain. "Are you okay?" he whispered. "I had a dream," she said, voice hollow. "A man was calling me by my old name." Kevin sat up. "What old name?" She looked at him for a long time, eyes wide, mouth open like the truth was crawling her throat. And then she shook her head violently. "Nothing. Forget it. It was just a dream." He held her until dawn, and they never spoke of it again. Tessa didn't do playdates. Didn't join PDA. Never posted selfies. Kevin handled the school pickups. He joked a friend that she was shy, or just not the social type. But at home, she was present. She loved fiercely. She modeled like her life depended on it. Still, there were whispers. From neighbors. From Kevin's own mother, Darlene. "She's sweet, but something about her don't sit right," she said once after Sunday dinner. "Those babies, they don't look like her. Not one of them." Kevin laughed it off. Darlene had never liked anyone he brought home. But once, after a heated argument about Tessa's past, his mother snapped. "You ever seen her ID? Her real birth certificate?" Kevin didn't answer, because he hadn't. He never had. And that, right there, should have been the first siren. But when you're building a family, you don't stop to check the foundation. You decorate the walls. You hang pictures. You fall asleep to lullabies, never once thinking that the life you built was borrowed. Or worse, stolen. It started with a letter. Not a fight. Not a hunch. Not some gut suspicion clawing at Kevin Darby's nerves. Just a white envelope with the Georgia Children's Hospital logo, half buried under utility bills on the kitchen counter. The air was humid that day. Tessa was in the backyard with the twins, laughing like she always did, too loudly, too perfectly. Kevin sliced the envelope open with his thumb and pulled out a single sheet. Layla Darby, genetic testing required. She had been sick off and on for months, bruising easily, fatigue, night sweats. The pediatrician had pushed for specialized tests, then referred them to the hospital. Kevin hadn't thought twice. It was probably nothing. Kids got sick, and they had 5 of them. Enough chaos to hide anything serious. But the wording of the letter made him pause, requesting presence of both biological parents for further genetic sequencing. Biological. The word felt surgical. He called the hospital the next morning, booked the appointment, gave his blood. He didn't ask questions. He didn't overthink it. He was a father. This was what fathers did. Protect, provide, show up, always. 3 days later, his phone rang. The number flashed Georgia Children's Hospital. "Mr. Darby?" The voice was cool, professional. "This is Dr. Elena Ramos. I oversee pediatric genetics here. I wanted to speak with you personally before we proceed." Kevin paced the garage, wiping grease from his fingers. "Is Layla okay?" "She's stable. That's not why I'm calling." A pause. "We ran your genetic panel alongside Layla's. Mr. Darby, your DNA doesn't match with hers. At all." Silence. "No match." Kevin's voice cracked. "Like, I'm not the father? I mean, not even close. No partial markers. No shared mitochondrial fragments." "I know what no match means, doctor," Kevin snapped. He stood in the garage, dizzy, tools blurred in his vision. He hadn't eaten. He hadn't slept well in weeks. Layla's fevers, Drew's teething, the bills, the stress of being a father, a husband, a man trying to hold together a life that had started to feel increasingly foreign. The doctor cleared her throat. "If you'd like to discuss this further, we..." Kevin hung up. He drove straight home, the engine screaming beneath him, his mind louder. The house looked the same from the outside. Red shutters, swing set, chalk drawings on the driveway. But inside, something had already died. Tessa was folding laundry in the living room, humming an old Patsy Cline tune. He slammed the door behind him. She looked up. "Kevin?" He tossed a letter and the genetic report onto the coffee table. "Read it." She didn't move. Her hands kept folding a pair of Jasper's socks. Tiny striped socks. "I said read it, Tessa." She finally looked down. Her eyes scanned the page slowly. No gasp. No tears. Just silence. Kevin's chest tightened. "Are they not mine?" His voice cracked. Layla, Jasper, the twins. Drew? Who do they belong to? She looked at him, really looked at him, and something in her gaze was bottomless. They're not mine either, she said softly. The room collapsed around him. The floor, the ceiling, the very oxygen. He lunged at her, not to hurt her, but to make her feel it, to force an explanation from her bones. What the hell does that mean? I was born Thomas, she said calmly, like she practiced 100 times in her head. Thomas Waymore. The name meant nothing. It shouldn't have, but it did. His knees buckled. He sat on the couch, staring at the woman, the stranger he'd built a life with. I transitioned when I was 23, she said. Top surgery, hormones, the whole thing. I couldn't afford full bottom surgery back then. It took years. But I got there. Eventually. He was shaking. You lied to me. I loved you. You lied to me. The kid stirred upstairs. He could hear Drew's sleepy cries, the clatter of a toy being dropped. Tessa's voice was quiet. You remember Emily? He blinked. Your cousin? She wasn't my cousin. She was a surrogate. She carried all 5. We use anonymous donors. I paid her under the table. She signed NDAs. I wanted a family, Kevin. I wanted to be a mother. Why didn't you tell me? You would have left. He didn't deny it. You think I would have married a man, he spat. I'm not a man. I'm your wife. No, you were never my wife. You were a goddamn experiment. The words hit her like bullets, but she didn't cry. That was the worst part. She just stood there, still small, unblinking, like she'd already mourned the collapse of her world long before he ever noticed the cracks. I was going to tell you after Drew, she said. But then you came home one day with that smile, that proud look on your face, and I thought, maybe I could just be this person. Maybe I didn't need to ruin it. You let me name those kids. I raised those kids. You let me kiss you, touch you, sleep next to you. I loved every second of it. He stood up so fast the lamp beside him crashed to the ground. She didn't flinch. You used me. No, Kevin. I gave you everything. I gave you the only thing I had left, myself. The door slammed behind him. He walked and walked through 3 neighborhoods, past the gas station where he bought Tessa a rose on their first Valentine's, past the diner where they met, past the church where they baptized Jasper. Everything felt contaminated, tainted, like he'd been living in a theater play, memorizing lines, playing his role, while the real story was happening behind the curtain. He didn't go home that night, or the next. He slept in his truck, engine off, parked behind the gym where he used to train recruits. The ache in his chest wasn't rage. It was grief, the kind of grief that didn't belong to death, but to something worse. The realization that you never knew the person you gave your life to. And worse, that maybe you didn't want to know. Kevin's hands trembled as he stepped toward her, the kitchen walls closing in like a tightening noose. The scent of chicken broth simmering on the stove was oddly comforting, so normal, so ordinary, like it belonged in a life that no longer existed. You told the kids? His voice cracked. Tessa stirred the pot calmly, not turning around. They're smarter than you think, Kevin. They had questions. I gave them answers. His breath hitched. You gave them confusion. No, she replied softly. I gave them truth. It's not confusion, it's clarity. He took another step forward, knuckles white, jaw clenched so tightly it ached. You gave them shame. You made me a joke. Finally, she turned. Her expression wasn't angry or afraid. It was tired, like she had been carrying too much for too long. I didn't do this to humiliate you, Kevin. I did this to survive, to protect what we had. He looked at her, really looked at her. The same woman he'd kissed every morning, the one who sat beside him at every school play, who had kissed their children's scraped knees and packed peanut butter sandwiches every day for 10 years. And yet, not the person he thought she was. That's not your soup on the stove, he muttered. What? That's not your body in those photos. Not your blood in their veins. Not your name on those birth certificates. You think love is about blood? I think love is about truth, he roared. The children heard it. Footsteps patted down the hallway upstairs. Dad. Jasper's voice cautious. Tessa turned toward the hallway. It's okay, baby, go back upstairs. I'll be there in a minute. Kevin's vision blurred. All he could see was a betrayal, not just of a secret identity or a surrogate or a lie, but of an entire life. He had worn devotion like a badge, and now it felt like a clown's mask. I fought wars, Tessa. Buried friends. Woke up screaming for 10 years straight. I built this family to have something real, something pure. And it was real, she whispered, even if it didn't come wrapped in the truth. But you let me build it on a grave. Tessa's face fell. I didn't know how to tell you. Would you have stayed if I had? He didn't answer, because they both knew the truth. He wouldn't have. He picked up the framed wedding photo from the counter, looked at it like a relic from a demolished church. His hands shook as he smashed it against the kitchen tiles. Tessa flinched, but didn't move. Get out, he said. She stared. I said get out, he screamed. She didn't argue. She picked up her coat. She turned once before opening the front door, her voice barely audible. I loved you. I still do. And then she left. But the silence that followed was worse. Kevin tried to carry on. He tried to be the dad who made pancakes on Saturdays, who watched Disney movies with Layla, who helped the twins with math homework. But something had cracked inside him. Something final. The therapist at the VA tried to reach him. His mother called. The pastor left voicemails. But Kevin withdrew like a wound folding into itself. He became obsessed with the past. He dug through paperwork, timelines, emails. He found photos of the woman who had carried the children, the surrogate, a woman named Chanel White. She had OD'd 3 years ago. No way to talk to her. He tracked down old contacts from Tessa's past. No one had answers, but what he pieced together was this. Tessa had started transitioning in her early 20s. She had been assaulted and nearly killed, left for dead in Alabama. She rebuilt her life under a new name, in a new town, swearing never let anyone get close enough to destroy her again. Until Kevin. Until the war-torn Marine with soft eyes and calloused hands. It was a love born of trauma, and it was now rotting from the inside. The final straw came when CPS showed up. A neighbor had reported erratic behavior. The children had been left unsupervised. Kevin had stopped answering calls. The state wanted to evaluate the home. Tessa was contacted. She filed for emergency custody. Kevin was served papers. He didn't even read them. Just stare at the seal of court, the name on the envelope. Moore versus Darby. That night, something snapped for good. He drove to the church parking lot, sat there in the cold car, staring at the steeple for hours. He remembered their wedding, the song that played as she walked down the aisle. He remembered the weight of her hand in his. He remembered Jasper's first steps. He remembered how she cried when Layla had her first fever. And then he remembered the lie that lived in every corner of their home, that breathed with them, ate with them, slept in their bed. He drove back. Tessa was at the house. She had come to pick up the kids. She didn't expect him to be there. The children were in the backyard, playing in the snow. The moment was quiet, the kind of quiet before a scream. Kevin walked into the kitchen. Tessa froze. He had the gun in his hand, the one from his deployment. Kevin, she whispered, please. But the sound of the shot swallowed everything. The children heard it. The neighbors called the police. The officers arrived to a house drenched in red. Kevin on his knees, blood on his shirt, the gun placed neatly beside him. He didn't fight. He didn't run. He just whispered. Everything I loved was a lie. He doesn't remember grabbing the knife. Not the moment his hand reached for the butcher block. Not the way the steel glinted under the kitchen light. Only the sound it made. Metal clanging against tile, an echo louder than the scream that never came. Tessa dropped mid-step. Blood pooled fast, soaking the hem of her dress, the same one she wore on their 3rd anniversary. Kevin stood over her, trembling. He could still hear the soup boiling, the clink of the baby's spoon on plastic, the dog barking 2 doors down. Everything normal, except for the red smear across the floor like spilled wine in a church. Upstairs, The kids were playing Minecraft, laughing, yelling, oblivious. Only baby Drew had witnessed it, sitting in his high chair, gnawing on a piece of toast, his tiny fingers covered in strawberry jam or maybe blood. He stared at his father without fear, as if nothing had happened, as if violence had always been part of breakfast. Kevin didn't run. He sat down in the living room beside Tessa's body and cradled her head like a broken doll. His lips pressed to her forehead one last time. He didn't cry. He couldn't. His soul had already ruptured weeks ago, the night he walked out and never came back. When the sirens wailed down the block, he didn't flinch. He opened the front door before they could knock. The officers found him barefoot, holding Drew in one arm and his hands in the other, still slick with blood. He whispered something as they cuffed him. The arresting officer later testified, "I couldn't understand what he said, but I think it was an apology." The trial dragged on for 7 months. The prosecution painted Kevin as a coward who couldn't handle the truth, a man consumed by toxic pride, whose ego couldn't survive a single crack. They called it control. They called it hate. They said Tessa's past wasn't the motive. His shame was. The defense told a different story. They brought in psychologists, experts, fellow veterans. They spoke of trauma, of moral injury, of the disorienting fallout when identity collapses under secrets. They said Kevin wasn't trying to kill a person. He was trying to kill the truth he couldn't process. One therapist said Kevin was a man drowning in betrayal, but more than that, he was drowning in self-conflict. He didn't kill Tessa because she was trans. He killed her because he had loved her, completely, profoundly, and that love now felt like treason to everything he believed about himself. The jury wept, but they convicted him. 42 years to life. No parole for 28. Tessa's funeral was sparsely attended. Her only blood relative, a distant cousin from Alabama, declined to speak. The church refused to hold a service. A few friends from the diner came. One woman left a note on her casket that read, "You taught me how to stand in my skin, even when no one clapped." Kevin wasn't allowed to send flowers, but he sent something else. A letter, taped shut and passed quietly to the social worker overseeing the burial. It read, "You were more than your past. You were more than your truth. You were my wife, and I was too small to see you clearly until it was too late. I pray our kids remember you better than I do." Now, in prison, Kevin writes letters every week to each of the 5 children. He doesn't send them. He knows the courts won't allow it, but he writes them anyway, tells them stories of when they were babies. Stories of Tessa singing lullabies, burning pancakes, dancing barefoot to Otis Redding in the kitchen. He signs every letter the same. "Love, Dad. Always Dad, even if not by blood." He stopped asking the question that once consumed him. Who did I marry? He knows the answer now. He married a woman, a complicated, quiet, graceful woman who lived in fear and still gave everything she had to build a family. She didn't deceive him to hurt him. She deceived him to survive. But there's one question Kevin still can't answer. It haunts him at night when the prison lights go dark and the walls close in. If you can't forgive someone you truly loved, does that mean you never really did? He stares at the ceiling, waiting for God or time to respond. So far, neither has.